The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to patreon.com/BPD Show and support the Benjamin Dixon Show.
We are living in a moment where the threat of fascism is real and rising, embodied by MAGA and Donald Trump, whose movement endangers every step of progress made in this country for all people, but especially for Black Americans. But as we focus on the dangers from the right, there is a more insidious and more subtle threat inside of the so-called resistance. Black leaders and Democrats entrusted to defend our interests are increasingly complicit in protecting the status quo, even if that means aligning with MAGA interests or blocking genuine progress from within their own ranks. I need to say that again. Even if that means aligning with MAGA's interests or blocking genuine progress from within their own ranks. This is happening right now in New York City, where establishment Democrats, including powerful Black politicians, have lined up alongside Republicans to oppose the Democratic nominee, Zohran Mamdani, in favor of Eric Adams. This kind of bipartisan sabotage isn't just about party rivalry. It's about power, resources, and who gets left behind. Now, we can't ignore the generational divide either. Older Black Americans and voters often cling to the party establishment out of habit or history or survival. But Black millennials and Gen Z have seen through the illusion because for them, affordable college, stable jobs, and secure housing are vanishing dreams. History is clear. Collaboration with empire, no matter the intention, no matter the cause, never ends well for the oppressed. So today we're examining not just the dangers outside, but the betrayals from within, and how the fear of socialism and comfort within the Democratic Party have turned survival into complicity, costing us real, tangible progress. Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and gender nonconforming individuals to another episode of the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am, of course, your host, Benjamin Dixon. Joining me today is Margaret Kimberly, executive editor and senior columnist at the Black Agenda Report, a fearless critic of U.S. empire and the Black political establishment, and the author of the essential book, Prejudicial: Black America and the Presidents, which exposes the often untold truth about every president's relationship with Black America. Margaret, thank you so much for joining me.
Would you tell us about your journey in terms of your background, your training, your education, your ancestral roots, whatever angle you want to speak of it from? But I am interested in how your journey led you to the Black Agenda Report as well.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. My parents were born in Ohio. Their parents immigrated in the first wave of the Great Migration in the 1920s from Alabama and Arkansas. We moved around a lot. My father did a lot of different things, but we settled in New York, New Rochelle, New York, a suburb just north of New York City. Politically, I think my parents were typical of Black people. They were, as a lot of Black people in the 50s, they were Republicans, lest we forget the Democrats were the party of the segregated South. But of course, they made that switch in the mid 60s. I remember I was a kid, I'm 65. I remember being a kid during the Vietnam War. My parents were adamant that the war was wrong. They always voted for Democrats. I think typical of most Black people on the left-leaning side of the Democratic Party, of course, strong supporters of the movement. My father worked at, there were a lot of new agencies during the War on Poverty, Great Society programs. He was at one point the head of the Human Rights Commission in the state of Minnesota. So those are, that was my political foundation. And I thought I was a leftist until I encountered Glenn Ford, may he rest in peace, the man who was the driving force behind blackagendareport.com. He and Bruce Dixon were the other co-founders. They both passed, sadly. And they were socialists, both of them. They were both members of the Black Panther Party in their youth. And so it was a learning experience, a growing experience for me to be exposed to people who were socialists, not just, Democrats who preferred the most liberal person. And that was an eye-opening experience for me. And I encourage everyone to encounter and have experiences with people whose political outlooks are maybe very different from your own. It's a way of learning so many things. I thought, as I said, I thought I was leftist, and I found out I wasn't. I was just a liberal. Like most people, had a Eurocentric, US-centric education. Didn't know enough about the global South, about the history of colonialism. And so when I look back at the things I first wrote and what I write now, it's a world of difference, being introduced to radical politics and the Black radical tradition of this country. So I think that sums up my life and my journey to date.
No, it's actually really insightful. I'm glad to hear that arc, because I think a lot of Black folks are terrified of that transition from the comfort of liberalism to the realities of something other than liberalism and capitalism. I was a leftist. I would be curious to see your division on how you parse between being a leftist and a socialist. Obviously, one's an economic paradigm, but I think a lot of leftists would think that they were socialists as well, because I thought being a leftist and embracing socialism, they became kind of synonymous to me, as democracy and capitalism are kind of conflated. But I would be curious to hear more about your division there. But I think you kind of just already went directly to something that's really important: the journey of awakening your understanding of our position as Black people in the belly of the beast, in the empire, completely cut off from not only our history, but the realities of what the empire is doing globally. Then the source of that drive, racial capitalism. Cedric, his name escapes me, the theorist behind that, racial capitalism. But then the counterbalance to it, at least the best that we have right now, would be something along the lines of socialism, and in context of how many Black folks today would fight against the idea of socialism, which to me is kind of really kind of ridiculous when you're on this side of the journey, but then being on that side of the journey too, I can't speak so much with bravado, because I was there at one time as well. Would you just speak to that?
Yeah, Robinson. Is it Cedric Robinson?
Cedric Robinson, yes, ma'am.
Okay,
God bless.
great.
That's the yes.
Yes. So the term, it's so funny in this country, the terms left and right, as politics have moved further and further and further to the right. Socialists are leftists, but socialists are, I define it as being anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist. And socialists traditionally believe the people should be in charge of the means of production. I'm thinking about China, which is socialist, has a socialist government, but they also have private ownership. They're large corporations. Some of the biggest corporations, biggest banks in the world are in China. But what happens there is the government tells them what to do. Not like here, where capital tells the government what to do, to the point where we don't even have our own government anymore. Democracy was always a tenuous thing. And now this new, what's Trump, big, beautiful bill, whatever. That one of the components of that bill is it makes it illegal for states to regulate artificial intelligence at all. So, Congress in the past has said the government cannot help people pay for their prescriptions because that was always a plan. Maybe the government can pay for pharmaceuticals. That's illegal, and that's because of control of capital. So I would say, and so it's difficult. People, just being a Democrat does not put you on the left because the Democratic Party goes further and further to the right. Here in New York, where I am, we're having this very contentious mayoral election. The winner of the Democratic primary, Zohran Mamdani, is he's DSA, Democratic Socialist. And he's put forward some very modest proposals, and people have lost it. He's communist. Trump says he's a communist. He's going to take all the money out of the city if he wins. He should lose his citizenship. We've had elected officials saying he can't win. He was the big money people, and they've been very obvious about it. We're behind Andrew Cuomo, former governor, who resigned in scandal a few years ago, but he had rich friends, and they put him forward in the Democratic primary, although he's also still on the ballot as an independent. The current mayor, Eric Adams, is on the ballot as an independent, so Zohran Mamdani will be running against both of them. There's a billionaire, Bill Ackman, very public. He's on Twitter saying that he's going to back Adams. He's not going to back Cuomo, and saying he wants to stop Mamdani. And Mamdani has said, for example, buses should be free. Well, buses were free during the pandemic. Rudy Giuliani, nobody mentions this anymore because he wanted to cement support on Staten Island, made the Staten Island ferry free. Everybody forgets about that now. So Mamdani says, well, maybe because there are food deserts in New York City, as there are in many urban areas. And he has said, well, maybe the city can run some supermarkets. People said, oh, my God, it's Stalinism. Do you want your supermarket to run like the Department of Motor Vehicles, which actually is funny because in New York, DMV has improved quite a lot and it runs very well. But that's an example of also why people are afraid of, if you ask people about proposals, like I'm thinking of Bernie Sanders. That's something more people are familiar with. When he first ran against Hillary Clinton in that primary, in 2016, he talked about Medicare for all. Goes by many names, but it's basically having a single payer healthcare system. It doesn't put us at the whims of private corporations, so we can live. Now, that's something most people want. But there were people who were afraid of the word socialist, which Bernie really is not. And then there were people, especially Black people, who were told, he can't win. It doesn't matter if he's talking about things you want. He was talking about public universities being free. Who needs that more than Black people, who, if we decide to go to college, are drowning in debt for the rest of our lives? But we were told he's not going to win, or white people aren't going to vote for him. So people hear about issues that are supported by leftists, and they want those things. But they've either been demonized about the word socialism, or they're afraid of what it means, or they're afraid that people can't get into office. So it's funny. People often talk about Republicans voting against their interests, but Democrats end up doing the same thing.
Especially Black Democrats.
Yes.
Which is kind of funny to me. This is just forgive me for centering myself for this split second, but it's so funny when folks are like, Dixon, you're a Democratic shill. And, I'm blocked by so many Black Democrats because of the technique that they use, especially when it comes to getting even a modicum of progress. Like you said, with Bernie Sanders, it wasn't radical socialism at all. In fact, it wasn't even further to the left than Europe. Most developed nations in Europe. They're doing the same thing now with Zohran Mamdani in New York. They're lining up behind the establishment that is promising them to not only keep the status quo, but to bring back the worst of the status quo, like Eric Adams is doing in New York City with stop and frisk and becoming the blackface of the police force of the empire. And then you have clowns like Jim Clyburn, who gallivants around the country, fancies himself as a Negro kingmaker of white folks. And he constantly appears just in time to sabotage the progress that we could have. And yet and still, there seems to be so many Black folks who follow behind that nonsense. And I get it, it's their own survival instinct. It's their own comfort level, because many of them are beyond survival. Some of them are at nice, comfortable levels. And then we see throughout history, people get power. And when they get power, they get compromised. It's not only just politics, it's in the Black church, it's everywhere we're surrounded. What I'm finding, though, is there's a generational divide, which is one of the key reasons why I wanted to speak to you on this issue, because there seems to be a divide with our elders who are saying no to socialism. That's scary, that we don't want that. God bless America, using talking points and framing of MAGA, whether they know it or not. And then the younger generation who's like, hey, we've had it. We can't even afford to live anymore. But then I see and hear your voice. And I'm reminded of Glenn Ford and Bruce Dixon. As much as God bless them, back in 2008, when they would not give Barack Obama a chance, I was still a good liberal and I was still a good Democrat. They used to irritate the devil out of me. And then come to find out and realize in retrospect, they were right all along, which tells me that it's not just it's not so much a generational divide, because there's plenty of seasoned and elder Black folks who get it. But speak to that entire arc that I just gave you, including James Clyburn, but also the presence of elders who get it, and they get it in the very clear, not even academic, but almost at a visceral level. And I imagine it has to tie back to the experiences of the civil rights era or further. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, let's start talking about James Clyburn. It's very funny to me. It seems that he believed his own hype about him. We were told he was this kingmaker. Democrats made a big deal about South Carolina being a pivotal state in primaries, and he being he was the whip, I believe, of the House. He was a leader of Democrats in the House, and his endorsement was key. Now, in South Carolina, other southern states, most Democrats are Black. So they set this up, making South Carolina key, but also using it to shut down any discussion of the issues that the Democratic Party oligarchs, the rich people, lest we forget, the Democrats raise $1 billion every presidential election year. First of all, making sure you get somebody they want. So Bernie Sanders or somebody else will come along and say what people want to hear, but they make sure that in the case of Black people, it was so cynical, telling Black people, white people aren't going to vote for him. He can't win. So vote against your own interests. But so Clyburn believed the hype about him being this kingmaker. I mean, a kingmaker would be someone independent, would not be a leader in the Democratic Party. Also, I don't know if it's still true, but there was a time Clyburn got more money from Big Pharma than any other member of Congress. 435, right? 435 people. He got more money from Big Pharma than anybody. What does that tell you? Of course, he's not for. And then I remember he said, well, Bernie didn't even ask for my endorsement, which Bernie should have done. However, was the guy who gets more money from Big Pharma going to endorse the guy known for Medicare for All? No, that wasn't going to happen. So Clyburn, I don't know if he really believed himself as this kingmaker, but to your point, here in New York, suddenly he came in that last week and endorsed Andrew Cuomo. Now, Cuomo got most of the Black vote, which also speaks to the generational divide and this decision-making of fear. I believe he did. First of all, it's name recognition. His father was governor. He was governor. And there's just this inertia. Yeah, I've heard of him. Mamdani, I never heard of him. So a lot of Black neighborhoods, Cuomo won. He won decisively over Mamdani, but younger people felt differently and voted for him. And I think it's a couple of things. Young people are having starkly different life experiences than their parents and grandparents. Their parents could go to college for very little money. New York City had a free university system up until the 70s, and public colleges were so cheap as to be almost free. So if you're in your 50s or 60s, you could get an education without being in debt peonage for your whole life. You knew you would get a job, a full-time job with benefits. And if you played your cards right, you could buy a house. You could have all of those creature comforts that we associate with having a quote unquote middle class life in the US. Young people have none of that. They can't afford college. If they get through it and they're in debt up to their necks, even if they just get a bachelor's degree, do they get jobs? No, we have this gig economy, part-time work, low-wage work. And now we have AI taking jobs altogether. So can they get like when I was young, getting out of college in the 80s, you could get your first job, get a little apartment, maybe have a roommate, and little by little you could move up in the world. They don't have any hope of doing any of those things. Buy a house. The median price of a house in Brooklyn, New York is now $900,000. And so we have seen a replacement, Black people leaving, white people coming in. And so we see this, everybody's like a rat in a maze. So I'll leave New York and go to North Carolina or Georgia or Florida. Maybe I can buy a house there. But there's gentrification there too. Maybe there are jobs in this or that place, but AI is taking the jobs. So by definition, just to survive, young people are willing to go outside of the political box. In general, I would say Black people are risk averse and vote out of fear. So you would vote for Cuomo instead of this guy that even if you like what he says, you're not sure he can win. In presidential politics, even with Obama, I don't know if you remember, were a lot of questions about him until he won the Iowa caucuses. And it was clear that white people would vote for him, which meant he could win. And then Black people did a collective 180 and all got behind him, but didn't get behind him until they were convinced he would be able to win. But that's the politics of fear. And then, of course, we have to think about how much elections really matter. So what happens if a Democrat gets in? Now, with Trump, can seem to be a harder argument to make because he's moved so far to the right, and ICE is snatching people up and all kinds of things. But people are fearful and afraid to make any change, afraid of things they don't know much about. Americans are very, very propagandized. We don't know what socialism is. We don't know the history of this country. The corporate media I call it state controlled because all they do is repeat. If you read the New York Times or Washington Post on foreign policy, it's like reading a State Department press release. They don't tell you anything new. And while I just reminded myself of something, and I hope I know I'm digressing a bit. The New York Times was so eager to smear Zohran Mamdani, they a right wing. Actually, the man's a white supremacist. His name is Jordan Lasker. He went by this name of Crimu. And they had this story that Mamdani, when he applied to Columbia as a high school student, Columbia University, where he was not admitted, he checked off the box African American in addition to Asian. Now, he was born in Uganda, a country where there were many South Asian people. So technically that's African American, but African American usually means us. And I think it's a legitimate debate. I would say he should not have done it. But then we find out that this person the New York Times gave anonymity to is a white supremacist. Black people have lower IQ, have smaller brains, the whole 9 yards. And they tried to backtrack. And actually, it's very funny. So this issue that one could debate has now been forgotten because people are saying, wait a minute, you didn't do a Google search on this guy. You were so eager to smear him, you didn't check, or you knew but thought you could get away with it anyway. But that's an example of corporate media and how they represent the ruling class. And so people don't have the information they want. In general, you've got to look for yourself. You can't depend on the educational system. You can't depend on the media in order to find out the things you need to know, to find out, well, what does socialism mean? What are socialist countries like? What is the U.S. doing around the world? What are we doing domestically? What are they doing domestically? I should put it that way. So I think I rambled and digressed a little bit, but I hope I was answering your question.
No, what I've come to realize and learn is that digression is kind of like improvisation in jazz. It's where the most important insights and structures of conversations lead to, because you led me right to where we kind of need to be. And it brings to my remembrance, this is the importance of remembrance. Elon Musk and MAGA had a field day last year calling him an African American. They were rubbing it in our faces. I never forget. Ron DeSantis in down in the state of Florida was rubbing it in Black America's faces, saying, "Oh, he's African American, our favorite African American." Now, again, I agree with you. I think Zohran should have thought a little better of that, but he is from Africa and he was naturalized as an American. I don't like that game personally, but if MAGA was really concerned about that, then why did they just play that game with us, except to, of course, trigger the collective Black consciousness here in the United States of America? And now they've inverted that and said, oh, no, that's something wrong there. He shouldn't have done that. Right. That's the game that they play. But that brings us like full circle to the entire conversation. Right. It's the need for Black folks to see ourselves through an international lens. Because if we don't see ourselves through an international lens, and this is honestly one of the things I picked up reading Black Agenda Report over the years and listening to the broadcast, if we don't see ourselves through that lens, then we end up only having the education given to us by the empire that we are still exiled in, right? Mm-hmm. We only have the understanding and the knowledge that they share with us. And now we've seen this arc of Blackness, this arc of Black liberation. And I would even go as far as saying this arc of Black liberation theology, where we've come to a generation where we're not only fighting against white supremacy, but we're fighting against this mutated version of Blackness, where you have on the one side, you have the James Clyburns, who has a form of Blackness, but denies the power thereof. But you have also now you have the entirety of Black MAGA, but you also have now Black, and it used to be prosperity gospel, but it's something totally different now. It's like the bastard child of prosperity gospel, where they don't even preach the gospel anymore. They just preach capitalism in the pulpit. And then you even have the antithesis of Black liberation theology. You have these Black preachers out here now who are swearing that Jesus wasn't Black, and that becomes their platform to preach from. It's like we're dealing with this manifestation of the very worst of Blackness, which is Blackness married to empire. But you can't be married to empire unless you're honestly willing to subvert and sabotage Blackness.
We'll be back with more of the Benjamin Dixon Show right after this.
Hey, everybody, this is Pastor Ben, and we need your support. Go to patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron right now. We have so many exciting things that are coming up, and I guarantee you, it's going to blow your mind. All of the stuff that we are getting ready to roll out is going to blow your mind. I'll almost say, or your money back. That's right. What we're getting ready to do, not only through this channel, but through every single thing else that we've been working on, and so many different partnerships we've been working on, is going to change the game. But we need your support. Patreon.com/the BPD show. Go over there right now and become a patron. Also, you can send us a PayPal, paypal.me/Hey Pastor Ben. PayPal.me/Hey Pastor Ben. You can try Cash App, $ Hey Pastor Ben. Cash App, $ Hey Pastor Ben. I say try because Cash App trips sometimes. However you want to support. Patreon.com/The BPD Show. PayPal.me/Hey Pastor Ben. $ Hey Pastor Ben on Cash App. However you want to support, we absolutely need your support right now. Let's get back to it.
In 1926, Carter G. Woodson gave us Black History Week. Now, almost 100 years later, many of us are still stuck in the month of February. But our legacy, it doesn't just fit into 28 days. The Black Heritage Day app is here to change all of that. It brings Black history to your fingertips every single day of the year. Based on years of research by Dr. Carl Mack, our historian, our griot, just 3 minutes a day, that's all it takes to read, learn, and listen to an oral narrative of your history.
Indeed, the Southern states went to war over the rights for each of the 11 Confederate states to own our ancestors.
To connect with your roots, to teach your children the truth they won't get in school.
In total, he is credited with 28 other inventions. But as a Black inventor, he struggled to gain.
Learn why New Year's Day was once considered the most dreaded day of the year.
Parents were separated from their children, siblings separated, and spouses separated from one another. And today, America has the nerve to lecture us about the status of the Black family.
Understand the political journey of Black America from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party.
It marked the beginning of Blacks' departure from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. And here's why we switched.
Dive into culture and triumph like Sidney Poitier's blockbuster film success. And so much more. From heartbreak to triumph. From January 1st to December 31st. This app is more than a download. It's a movement. It's a community of Black families raising their kids on truth and on legacy. Download the Black Heritage Day app for free in the Google Play Store or on the Apple App Store. This isn't just an app. It is a daily celebration of who we are.
Welcome back to the Benjamin Dixon Show.
It's like we're dealing with this manifestation of the very worst of Blackness, which is Blackness married to empire. But you can't be married to empire unless you're honestly willing to subvert and sabotage Blackness. What are your thoughts?
Well, you're absolutely right. And I'm seeing something else happening now. This idea that Black people should not be active at all. Let other people step up. These memes that, Black people are dancing even though World War III is about to start, which is, I don't know why people think that's a flex, but anyway, so they do. After Kamala Harris lost, it's like it's somebody else's turn. We shouldn't be on the front lines. I think it's interesting because a lot of people saying this were never on any line, the front line or the second or the third, and now want to act like they were. But
better preach, Black woman.
But this idea that that Black people can play no role politically, that because due to our disappointments and the failures of the system on our behalf, we're out. That's it. That's all we can do. As if climate change won't hit us, as if, Trump and Netanyahu's in Washington or coming to Washington. He and Trump are trying to restart a war with Iran. That's not going to impact us. Really, it won't. So all of these, so that's the newest thing I find, frankly, very disturbing. But yes, we need to know our history, and our history and it didn't start with Trump, changing websites and taking Black people's pictures out. This has been going on for a long time. There was a counter-revolution to the liberation movement, and for more than 50 years, and that was done in a variety of ways. You create a buffer class of people like me who had the chance to go to colleges you might not otherwise have gone to, giving opportunity to some, um, but moving to the right, further and further to the right all the time. So that Bill Clinton, what did Bill Clinton do? Bill Clinton, his crime bill put thousands of Black people in jail across the country. Bill Clinton is responsible for the loss of our media consolidation. It used to be you couldn't own a TV station and a newspaper in the same city. Well, if that were true, Rupert Murdoch couldn't own Fox and the New York Post, but he does. That's because of Bill Clinton. Remember, there were so many Black radio stations. Well, now I think there's 6 or 7 corporations that control everything, almost everything we see and read and hear in media. And those were attacks on us. These were the liberation movement was successful. It changed the way we saw ourselves. It changed the way everybody in the country saw themselves. There would be no Medicare or Medicaid if not for the civil rights movement. Nobody would have had any of those things. And this is terrifying to the oligarchy. And they have made sure that there's no talk of any of that ever again. So we've been dealing with this counter-revolution, which distorted our own memories. We're talking about gentrification. Remember Washington, D.C. was Chocolate City? Well, that's Cafe Au Lait City. And we have Black so-called leadership. We have a Black mayor here in New York City, but all he talks about is how he used to be a cop. He brought back Bloomberg's stop and frisk. His police department, they used to at least fire cops who killed people. Adams does not discipline. There's a civilian complaint review board. It doesn't do very much, but they would recommend that a cop be fired for misconduct. Adams doesn't even do that. So that's where we are, of so-called Black leadership who owe their positions to rich white people. And the people we mentioned, who have passed away, and that those memories and experiences are gone with them. And you have to make, as I said, a concerted effort on your own to learn history outside of the box, to learn about the rest of the world. So I think it's important for people to know this did not happen accidentally. This is very deliberate. And we have to make sure that we know that. So there were a handful of Black people in Congress in the early 70s, the first members of the Congressional Black Caucus. I think there were 10 of them. Now there are more than 40. But so what? What do they do? What do they do for us? They owe their positions to rich white people. And if any of them step out of line, they get rid of Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman. They spent millions of dollars on primaries to get them out, just to make sure, in case anybody had any big ideas about being really progressive, that they got over themselves and they got their minds right, and just to make sure that nobody thought about actually proposing any kind of meaningful change.
What you are saying is somewhat triggering to me, right? Because of the intentionality of every step, and the fact that Black folks, we have not been able to see at scale. There have always been prophetic voices, and I when I say prophetic, I don't mean in the pulpit. I mean in the streets. I mean in media and in the pulpit. But there have always been voices who've seen it, but not allowed to get the masses of Black folks to see it, which part of the question is about Black Agenda Report and you all carrying on that legacy and extending that legacy and your readership and your reach. But then I have to go in a little bit further here, because I wonder if this Black Misleadership class, trademark Black Agenda Report, right? At least that's where I first heard it and only heard it. I wonder if they realize how this plays out throughout history for collaborators with empire. It never plays out well for them in the end, whether it be the Sanhedrin Council in the Roman Empire in Jesus's day,
whether it be the African tribes who collaborated with colonizers and enslavers who ended up getting enslaved themselves because they thought that they could work out a deal with white folks, but at the end of the day, it never did work out well for them. Whether it be any version of that, there's always a class of people who think that they can get over by collaborating with empire instead of fighting and resisting empire. And then I want to ask Black folks also, you mentioned Netanyahu, if they don't realize the trajectory that we're on right now, man, there's white folks in this country who would salivate at the chance to do to us what Zionists are doing to Gaza, and how they think it's a safe path, maybe for them because they think that they'll die soon enough and don't have to live with it, but for their children and their grandchildren, their Black grandchildren who have to live in a world that they created by collaborating with empire. That's the depth and breadth of it. I'll let you take it from there.
Well, it depends. There are people who are cynical and they just don't care. They don't care what comes after them. There are people who are in denial, who convince themselves it's going to be different for them. Or they say, well, I'm going to get mine while I can, and maybe I can help the next generation. So there are all kinds of ways people excuse being part of this class that is used to hurt all of us. So I'm sure if you talk to 100 different Black misleaders, you might get 100 different answers. But the most important thing is for the rest of us to know that many of these people are our enemies. The Black face in a high place is not only not necessarily our friend, but many times they are our enemies. And it's important, whatever they think of themselves and what they're doing, it's important for us not to be fooled about where things are headed. And I just want to say, too, this is all very frightening. This is a very frightening moment. People worry about where they can live, how they can live. When I see homeless people on the street, and by the way, I don't know about where you are, but here in New York, people living on the street are almost all Black, almost all of them. And people living very precarious lives, this fear, is that going to be me? We have and that's not I'm going to digress a tiny bit. One of my siblings was a social worker in a psychiatric hospital. And when she started her job, she said they had almost 900 beds. When she retired 20 years later, they had 300 beds. So why is anybody surprised that there are mentally ill homeless people on the streets and in jails? That's called austerity. That was Andrew Cuomo, by the way, who was in charge of that. But that's all over the country. The government doing less and less, acquiescing to the demands of this ruling class. And so there's less for people to be secure in. And it's making people personally self-destructive. I'm seeing behaviors, and I always say it's capitalism. Capitalism is ruining people's lives, ruining our psychological health, our physical health, and that's where we are right now. And the misleaders have assisted this. They have played their role. We had a congressman in New York was chair of foreign relations. Oh my God, from Queens. Why am I can see his face. I'm telling you, it's a senior moment. Meeks, Gregory Meeks.
Okay, yeah.
Gregory Meeks is the ranking Democrat on the House Foreign Relations Committee. Giving money to Ukraine, defending Israel, all of them. Everybody and Zionists here in New York, if you want to run for a city council seat in a neighborhood with no Jewish people, you had better say you're going to support Israel. If not, you'll find yourself, someone will appear with a lot of money running against you. And it's important for us to say that. And do people care? Do they not care? I don't know. It doesn't, in the end, it doesn't matter because we see the end result. Police departments here in the United States send cops to Israel to be trained. so they can treat people here the way people in Gaza are treated. Billions of dollars, our money, while we're told no for everything we need. No. Can we have more money for schools? Nope. Can we have more money for hospitals? Nope. They just took this big, beautiful bill, cuts Medicaid. So rural hospitals in southern states where most Black people live are going to close because of these people. And the misleaders, Hakeem Jeffries is a waste of humanity. I'll just say it. Cory Booker with his long 25, talking for 25 hours. For what? Who needed him to talk for 25 hours? He didn't even use that time to oppose any legislation. Hakeem Jeffries is he can't even pretend. I mean, it's horrible that he can't speak. He and other Democrats have said they won't endorse Mamdani. He won the Democratic primary. You should endorse him. But the oligarchs said no, and so he won't. And they don't propose any. When you think about if the Democrats were really an opposition party, wouldn't you, just off the top of my head, wouldn't you send people out all over to the red states and say, you're going to lose your rural hospital. You're going to lose your Medicaid. Nope. Because they just want to get back in. They want a few different slogans, and they're hoping they don't have to really do anything or fight, and they can get back into power, which may not even work for them, even though that's worked in the past. So Hakeem Jeffries, how is he any better than Trump if he doesn't fight Trump? I mean, not even rhetorically. I mean, nothing. So that's where we are with these misleaders. These people are dangerous to us. They are our enemies, and they should be seen that way. And I think it's important for people, even if you're not sure what action to take, I think it's important to know where you stand and where these people stand. And it's not with you.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Black Agenda Report. How many years strong are you all there since its founding, and how many years have you been there? Tell us about your readership and the reach and the broader community, because it's been, again, I first found out about it back just before Barack Obama started running for president, to be honest with you, but I know that they were there longer than that.
2006 we started. First we were with a site called Black Commentator. Starting in like 2002 or 2003, we decided to break out on our own, Glenn, Bruce, and myself, in 2006. So the first issue of blackagendareport.com was in October of 2006. And I remember Glenn had an article called "Let the Black Caucus Be Black." And he was talking about Nancy Pelosi controlling Charlie Rangel and John Conyers, who had been these progressive stalwarts for years, but she stopped them at every turn. And I think that's a great example of our work, revealing analysis from a Black left perspective. That's what we say, domestically, internationally. We've had, of course, changes over the years. There always are. We have a good team of regular contributors. We reprint from other publications, and we're planning on doing some new stuff in the next few months to expand our reach, which is national and international. I'm always surprised, maybe I shouldn't be, that people all over the world make reference to Black Agenda Report, invite us to speak, to travel. And I think it's because we have that perspective of real leftism, being anti-capitalist, being anti-imperialist, and always tying that to Black people. I always say of Glenn Ford, he was the Blackest person I knew. He was a red diaper baby, grew up as a socialist, but also grew up in the segregated South, was in the military in the Vietnam era, a Black Panther. So all of those experiences, he put Black people first in everything he wrote and talked about. How will this impact us? And everything impacts us. So these people who, there's nothing for us to do, we're just going to stand back, that's not, you can try that if you want, but that's just being in denial, which is not a river in Egypt. So that is our work at blackagendareport.com. We publish every articles every Wednesday, and I have interviews, Black Agenda Radio, every Friday, which can be heard on Pacifica stations like WBAI in New York, WPFW in Washington.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you've been there from day one, square one.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so awesome. Listen, I have so many things that we can dig into and talk about, but I do want to honor in your time.
I'll come back.
Oh no, absolutely. And listen, I'm gonna do a shameless plug here. I'm getting ready to drop an article on why Christians, Bible-based Christians, cannot be capitalists, and I'm exegeting that thing from top to bottom. It is just, but I don't have a place to put it. I don't know if that fits over there at Black Agenda Report, but if it doesn't, I have some other stuff I would love to share with you all.
Okay, sure. And speaking of shameless plugs, I'm
Absolutely.
not as good as I should be at promoting myself. I wrote a book, Prejudential: Black America and the Presidents in 2020. I'll just hold it up so you can see it. Prejudential: Black America and the Presidents. I go through from George Washington to the first Trump administration, talking about, in a way, what we've been talking about all this time, the foundations of this country, how presidents, slaveholders, segregationists have impacted our lives to this day. It's published by Steerforth Press, but you can get it from all the sites, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, get it from your local bookstore. And I think folks would